Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, 101K Bitcoin, practically Bitcoin has not been slowing down. Things have been going crazy, ladies and gentlemen. That is what we love to see. The markets are accelerating super fast. Man, let me tell you that, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, right? We've been talking about fundamental pullbacks. They're not happening. They're not going to happen. Right? The probability of them happening are near zero now because we continue to break structure to the upside. Right? We can see that we have this last relevant high. We have this low over here, and we can actually see that this low never went below these lows in terms of daily candle closes, and we can clearly see we have a new high, right? So if we were to continue the path we're going, which is just following fundamental structure, trading and being retesting within a relevant zone, then let's say we do top out even here, right? Like roughly 101K. Then the next areas we would be trading are going to be, somewhere within this zone between 101 to 97K, right? The days of 91,000 liquidity sweep are practically over, right? Something big and dramatic would have to happen, or we would have to go, kind of cycle out full on range for a couple of weeks, which would be disastrous. And I really don't think that's going to be happening, especially with market liquidity, global liquidity being in our favor. We talked about how last time we were roughly 31 days into having all this liquidity enter the markets for us, favoring us. And the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, we are delayed by like 2 months. So we are going to be expecting at least, at the bare minimum, 2 more months of green pumps. Look, this was also kind of expected when we talked about the bigger time frame. We talked about January, February, March was going to be the pullback, right? The pullback phase. So we talked about that. We talked about how the beginning of April was going to be a liquidity sweep, right? Because we swept the 3-month candle, we swept the monthly candle of March, we swept the last weekly candle, and of course, that means we swept the last relevant daily candle. And we can see after that, we talked about boom over here, right? Boom over here. We went up, down, right? And then we continued to go up higher, right? We said how this is a nice daily order block, and if we respect it, we should continue going up higher. We did, right? We had consolidation for roughly a week, holding very strong price. Boom, massive pumps, right? And then again, the same type of scenario practically where we were consolidating for like a week or two before we continue to pump. Exciting times, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, we should be really excited. We can see all the markets are going crazy. Something like Miro has pumped 16%, Flux is up 11%. The whole others chart is roughly up, 10%. We talked about how, is it a good time to be buying altcoins? And we're saying yes, right? When we were looking at this chart, if we reverse it, right, take boom, reverse, we were talking about how, hey, these were practically the last relevant highs. And we can see that at one point we were below 78% of a retracement, right? We were below 78%. We were traced 78%. And it's like, guys, if we were traced 83, 84, 85%, roughly more or less, right? Because we can see we're between, practically 79 and, 89%, right? We actually hit, if we take this out right here, we were roughly like right in the middle. So pretty much, right? Pretty much we were traced a good amount, like 84, 85% from the highs for altcoins. And it's like, hey man, how many more indicators do you need that you just need to simply get in, right? We just need to simply get in. Look, we talked about this, right? How this was creating a reverse head and shoulders, and we actually got it, right? Fantastic. It is starting to go up. Look, I don't expect too many, pullbacks, right? We do have a little bit of a zone here for altcoins, right? But anything that kind of gets pulled back or stalls out is probably going to be just for a day, 2 or 3. No more, multiple weeks of slowness, right? we have this structure, and of course we have this next relevant structure. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are going to bounce fast, at least practically up to this zone, right? The next thing for altcoins is practically to be going up here, bouncing off here, then bouncing off the all-time highs, right? We can see we have a nice double top. And then, right, once we kind of just start bouncing, we are going to be pushing. And once we burst, there is no going back, okay? Once we go, there is no going back, right? Because the thing is, we are going to see something very, very similar to this down here where we were recovering, right? Imagine this was our chart now, right? We're talking about how, hey, boom, prices and altcoins went down a good amount, right? We recover, we get past this relevant structure right over here, right? Boom, we break past this hell zone. But once we kind of go past here, look, it was just very, very quickly. Yeah, sure, this was technically a couple of months. But the thing is, we're not going to be waiting for that to break out, right? We're not going to be waiting months on end. We might wait a couple of weeks, right? We might wait a couple of weeks before we start breaking out. But I don't think we're going to be waiting like another 6 months before we get the official breakout, right? I believe altcoin season will be happening during, based off the candles, based off everything, I believe most likely altcoin season will be happening late summer to early fall. Because even if we go on the 3-month candles, right? January, February, March is down. If we recover, let's say near all-time highs in April, May, June, right? Then July, August, September should be some type of pumps. And, we could even see maybe even October, November, before December probably has a little bit of sell-off, right? That's just the way I see it. That is just the way I see it. Since we're also on the 3-month, we can see that we actually have been holding very, very well in this zone, a big support. So, big pumps are to be coming, ladies and gentlemen. They really, really are. Expect altcoin season to be absolutely crazy. We think we go up to $1 trillion, right? We have a few zones marked up with how much liquidity is coming to markets. We have 1 trillion, and then we have also the 1.5 trillion just for the altcoins. Now, I will say, I will also mark up roughly 800 billion market cap because there's a good chance that around this area, we may top out for the first time before we get a double pump, right? Double pumps are not guaranteed. They are not guaranteed, but it is something, we should be considering. But obviously we will, readjust our game plan once we are there in the future, right? But look, even if we take, let's say this to this, and we flip it around, right? Just using simple tools, we can see 1.6, like 750 billion, right? 2.21 trillion. That's what I'm saying. So this zone is going to be the sweet zone. So, a 3 to 4 times pump in the total, markets for the liquidity is going to be insane. There is a chance, of course, right? Because if we took from here to here, and we can see we smashed it, right? We smashed. We're past the 3.3 at this point. I mean, we went super, super high. Now, I don't think, right, we're going to be smashing it that hard to the point where, we will be going all these next crazy levels. If anything, maybe we can get to the 3.2, right? And if 3.2 is roughly, 1.5 trillion, right? Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. There's good chances that we could very well end up somewhere here to here as the main range. Now, of course, that is a big range. The more money is in, the extra 200 billion market cap, 300, 400 billion would always make a difference. But remember, your coin, at the end of the day, it already has a set amount that it's going to pump, right? Based off the project itself, the utility behind it, the update, the exchanges, the narrative, and everything. So, even if we get more global liquidity, there's always that chance where it actually might not make too much of a difference because, ladies and gentlemen, at one point, you remember, this is kind of like supply and demand. Who's going to be buying, let's say, certain tokens for 50 times the amount, right? Only the complete noobs and casuals, I think that it will go up another 50 times from that price. But yeah, look, markets are, set to be going crazy. Is it too late to buy altcoins? No, even on a green day, right? Even on a green day, I usually don't say this and I'm not a financial advisor, but even right now, buying is not bad, because the reality is, we use render as an example. I love using render as an example because it's just super, super simple, right? We expect to be breaking 525 in the near future. We expect to be breaking, let's say, 622 in the near future. So buying at 470, sure, you didn't get the 420 discount, but you're still looking very, very solid. You know, AKT is going to be looking to be breaking out over the next couple of days, right? So, you know, it had this 180 range. And then when we go, the next kind of range is, you know, like $2. So yeah, buying at 170, no one's complaining, right? And then of course we have to recover all the structure, get above back over here. Let's say for AKT, this big zone of, you know, 230. That's probably when it's going to really slow down. So the 170, fantastic buying price. Caspa, right? You know, we're going to be breaking these ranges of, you know, 10 cents, of practically 11 cents, and we're going to be looking to be coming back and reclaiming zones. So, you know, for me, if it's one of those things where it says, hey, you know, we've had great buying opportunities, literally, you know, I would say, you know, ever since early February, really, like, let's say for something Ondo, if you bought Ondo under $1, you're chilling. You are chilling, right? For example, Ondo under $1 is amazing. Obviously, Ondo for 90 cents, 80 cents, you know, even 70 cents is going to be a better ratio, but objectively, you are still doing very, very, very well. But yeah, that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys did enjoy. Remember, the markets are only going to be speeding up, right? If we look at the total market cap, we can see, right, that look, we never got like this pullback, for example, right? Boom. But we are pushing up higher and higher. We can see the total market cap actually has recovered a good amount. We're probably roughly 50% of what we were. Yeah, a little bit more than 50%. We are already back up to, you know, 55, almost 60% of the total market cap. That was just in crypto. You know, from its highs. So look, you know, it's not going to slow down. It is not really going to slow down. If there's going to be days where it slows down, it's going to, like I said, it's going to be days. But overall, we talked about the other chart. Global liquidity is going to be going absolutely crazy. And I expect, you know, us to be really, really pumping. You got to remember, something like stocks, you know, when they drop a couple percent, that's like trillions being lost, right? When they go up a couple percent, that's like trillions being pumped in. When we talk about crypto, a couple percent, that's just billions practically. That is literally just billions. So crypto is such a small baby. The amount of money that could be coming in is so crazy. Everyone's going to want to jump in on this. So I'm super, super excited. I hope you guys are too. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.